It was a night like any other night. Then something happened.
You see that?
Something different.
It's no shooting star.
Why here? Why now? Why clowns?
Hello and welcome to episode 37 of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we review the movies on our shelves. Every 2 weeks we'll take a randomly selected movie from our collection and we'll review it ourselves. I'm Brian Morgan, and as always...
is Mr. Daniel Bergman.
Daniel Bergman. Wow, that's full slow name going there. Name calling? I mean, you didn't call yourself a name. It is your name. Is that name announcement? Is that what we're doing here?
I don't know. Is he deepening his voice? I don't deepen my voice. There, he did it again.
Yes. Yay. All right.
Maybe we're just being a little extra silly for this episode.
I don't know why. As a reminder to our listeners, we are discussing Dan's selection of killer clowns from outer space. I kind of feel like you have to do that when you say the name. I mean, I didn't do it when I was watching it. I just did it just now. But this movie kind of reminded me of a thing that you kind of want to go back to the 50s drive-in kind of horror movie kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of. We'll talk about parallels with that.
Yeah, but first, let's get to our listener feedback. Okay, I'll stop doing that now. I'm sorry. From listener Jeff Edwards on our Howard the Duck episode, he said, "There are so many quotable lines in this episode. Kryptonian razor blades. He's a duck. They do that. Duck boobs." So I think he was actually talking about our episode and not the movie, so that's good.
Yeah, I was about to say, who'd have thought that we would have said so many quotable lines about...
We're quotable!
about a movie that I wasn't all that thrilled about.
I've peaked, and actually, you know what? All you need is your own parking spot, and we've peaked. We're quotable and a parking spot. I don't even know why that's important.
It is to some people.
I did forget to provide some feedback on the Ghostbusters episode. Just a little update. I spoke with Justin since then, and he still hasn't picked up Ghostbusters, so I'm a little disappointed, and I may have to delete him from my Facebook friends list.
You want me to take him out?
To a ball game? Take him out to the ball game. No, that'll be okay. Since we're recording and this goes out to the internet, that would make it premeditated, and we don't need any of that. So Knuckles. If something happens to Justin, we had nothing to do with it.
I ain't saying nothing.
Justin, if you can hear us, we do not wish you harm. We hope you live a happy and healthy life. Great, now we're plotting murder. I didn't even realize that was going to be a thing when we started this podcast.
Oh, the strange directions we do go in.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a tangent I don't even know how to come back from. So let's just move on to how this got on your shelf. And since my story is quite simple, I don't own it. We'll move to Dan. Dan, how did this get on your shelf?
On my shelf for one simple word. Therapy.
Oh? Okay.
I don't know if you remember way back when, when I was in the Navy and everything, I used to have that condition, which is informally referred to as colorophobia, which is the unreasonable fear of clowns.
I think that's actually the technical term for it, not the colloquial term for it.
Well, no, it's they said it was the informal verbalizations of certain phobias and everything, and they said that was considered an informal.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure what that means. I'm not an expert in psychology, but that's the word that people use. I'm not certain if actual medical professionals use that word for therapy, but I'm going to say that's what I had because it's a word and we use it.
Yay, words.
So, but yeah, I used to be deathly afraid of clowns.
I didn't recall that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of people used to make fun of me about that. I don't know where it came from. Maybe, like, they had that repressed memory syndrome or whatever they call it, but I don't remember anything ever happened to me because of a clown. It's just that sometime in my conscious life, I just could not, stand to be around them.
Interesting. I've always had a fondness for clowns. I think they're amusing and entertaining, but movies are filled with references to clowns that are creepy. The one that comes to mind, aside from this movie, is the clown doll in Poltergeist, if you recall that one.
Yeah, that's one I even think about, because of course, everyone, because of the remake, everyone's going to think of Pennywise in It.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, now there's two versions of Pennywise. There's the latest version and the Tim Curry version, which I haven't seen the new version yet, so I really can't say who's the superior, but I'm just going to go on a limb and just say Tim Curry, because I just, I love him.
Because it's Tim Curry, I was thinking the same thing.
But to reference real-world examples of like a scary clown, of course, we were talking about serial killers a few episodes ago, and there's, of course, John Wayne Gacy and his Pogo the Clown. There were a lot of examples for me to draw from as reasons to be afraid.
Understandable.
I just didn't understand why. But then, this movie came out, and I don't know, it's like, that's about time, too, when I was really developing my sick, morbid self. And this movie just kind of was a great melding of the two. So I watched it. This was my therapy. I'm not as afraid of clowns anymore. And I embraced this movie as part of the therapy, because there's another term that they use, and it was made very prominent in Batman Begins. And the scene where, in the beginning, Bruce Wayne is afraid of bats because he fell down the pit. The bat scared him. And that became like his big fear. But then when he grew up and was developing into the character of Batman, he was in the Batcave and the bats came and he was afraid at first, but then he stood up and just absorbed it. There is a therapy term for that.
It's like exposure therapy or something like that.
Yeah, something to that nature. And so this movie was my exposure therapy, but for clowns.
Okay, fair enough. And apparently it worked? Yeah, no, maybe? I mean, you watched the movie and you still like this movie, which...
Yeah. And, during Halloween, used to go to Not Scary Farm, and, of course, they have, the clown thing. Of course, they also have that at Universal Studios. They had, at one time, the clown maze you go through, the Wicked Circus or Psycho Circus or whatever term they want to put in there. And, I go through it, and it doesn't feel very much different. It doesn't give me any panic attack or anything. So, yeah, I'd say this helped.
Okay, self-therapy. Yay, it works.
Yeah.
Or at least anecdotally it did in Dan's case.
It did for me.
Listeners, we are not advising you to self-medicate or self-psychotherapize.
Results may vary.
Fair enough. Okay, so I watched this movie on Hulu because I did the quick search of the internet to see if it was streaming, who had it available, because I wasn't really sure how I was going to watch it. And once I got onto the Hulu, I did discover that if you own an older Vizio flat panel television, like most of the TVs are nowadays, Hulu no longer supports those older televisions in their software, but happily I have other ways to watch Hulu things. So watched it on the TV, no one was home until about an hour in. This movie's not very long, it's only about an hour and a half. So there was about 30 minutes left when Christy and McKenna came home, and I paused it and went and did whatever it was we were doing, and then came back to the movie. And then Christy had to run out and go do something else. So when she got back, I said, "Hey, consider yourself lucky. You did not have to watch Killer Klowns from Outer Space with me." Any part of it. And she said, "Good." So
your story is enthralling.
Well, the funny thing is, apparently we've never watched it together. So I didn't know if she'd seen it or not, or just had no desire to see it in the first place. And I still don't actually know because I didn't ask if she'd ever seen it. I suppose I should have. Maybe a little marriage therapy. We'll sit down and watch this together and go, see, now you can watch it. No, I don't think that's how that works. Anyway. But when I first started watching the movie, the first thing that struck me was the MGM lion roar. And I know that's dumb. It has nothing to do with clowns and nothing to do with movies. It's like going to the theater back in the 90s when they used to do the big THX sound check, if you will, in the theater. I love that. It was the best 7 seconds of any movie.
Oh, absolutely.
And you never see the MGM lion roar, and I was like, whatever happened to them? Apparently they don't make movies anymore. The studio still exists, or the production company still exists, or the business, but they don't make movies and distribute them like they used to. So we'll never get the lion's roar again.
Not until some executive feels nostalgic and he gives us a computer-generated version of such and he starts putting them back in movies. But until that time, yeah, no lion roars. You'll just have to watch DVDs.
Yeah, I always liked the lion roar.
Oh, it's like, aside from the THX thing, which was a relatively later thing when I started watching movies as a child, there was the 20th Century Fox fanfare.
Funny story, I always associated that with Star Wars. Like, oh my god, Star Wars is on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was the big thing. Yeah, the lion's roar. I think those were the two big ones. There were a couple other small ones or anything. And I do like that Quentin Tarantino uses, and I don't even know what to call it. It's just this old-time fanfare that he puts in front of some of his movies that harken back to like the late 60s, early 70s grindhouse movies. I just remember seeing some of that in some of the old art house theaters that my brother and cousins would take me to when we saw older movies. And I'd see that. And so yeah, it's like he's kind of bringing that nostalgia back. I like that. So again, who knows? Someday someone like Tarantino who likes the older days of movie making, he'll bring back the lion.
Yay, the lion. Still excited. I still like the lion.
Yes.
But I didn't realize this movie was made in 88.
Yeah, that's the thing we were talking about. 30 years old.
Yeah, I thought this movie was older than that, like it was made in the early 80s.
No, it's late 80s. Still, it's kind of like the tail end of 80s, and that was the thing I liked about it. We were talking about the differences between, say, like Ghostbusters and Howard the Duck, which were both made in the 80s. And, of course, Ghostbusters had music that took you back, and Howard the Duck did not.
It had music that reminded you of the 80s. It didn't take you back, but it was definitely the 80s.
And this movie didn't even try. That's the lack of effort, I think, was what I admired most about it. And I think, though, because they never really tried to adhere to a specific time period, it was just a town. And nobody really dressed outrageously, except the clowns.
I disagree.
Which character?
At the very beginning of the movie, when John Vernon, the old cop, is talking to those two kids, those are
the two punk
80s,
rockers?
Yeah, those are 80s dress, hands down. The two guys in the ice cream truck, they are flat 80s. Debbie's hair and Mike's hair, straight 80s. Look at that and tell me that you don't see the 80s all over that with the feathered hair.
Okay, the feathered hair I'll agree with. The ice cream truck guys, they're just wearing white coats.
Yeah, but under that, they were wearing, like, 80s style, like, colored clothes and that sort of thing.
I mean, like,
and some of it's
pastels.
making a comeback now.
And that's what I was going to say about the punk rockers. It's like the 80s punk rock, that kind of kept going. I don't think that really ever changed.
But again, you couple that with the hair and dress of the others, and this is straight out of the 80s.
Okay, I won't argue that. It could be one way or the other. I did not see it as an important piece as to say that they're desperately trying to say this was the 80s. They just made a film, and that's what they just happened to be wearing at the time. I don't even think they had a costume department, except for the clowns.
Okay, I agree with that statement, that I don't think they were trying to say this is set in the 80s. However, it is set in the 80s. It's not one of those timeless classics where people are just wearing suits and you just happen to see some buildings that existed in the 80s and don't exist now, or there's a feel for the 80s. It's got an 80s-centric clothing style because I think, like you said, the people just showed up in what they were wearing one day. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No. I mean, again, especially the emphasis wasn't on time period or anything. I mean, the entire budget was spent on production and I think a little bit for the clowns and the props. It was like, they said, I think IMDb said it was only like a $2 million budget to make this film.
Yeah, and that's something that I kind of wanted to discuss. Was I had read the same thing about the $2 million budget. And when I went into this movie, I didn't do the research beforehand. I did it afterwards. So when I watched this movie, I thought, oh my God, this is terrible. Why is Dan doing this to me? This is straight garbage. And then afterwards, when I was doing the research and kind of brought it all together, I realized what these guys were trying to do, and it made it a lot more fun because this was an homage to some of the 50s horror films like The Blob.
And
Invasion of the Body Snatchers and things like that. And it was done on such a low budget and done with such a investment by the guys that made this. You could feel that. And even one of the articles that I read said this was a passion project for them.
Yeah, in the special features, they said this was like a 4 years in the making type of thing. You know, it's just they struggled to get it done because, you know, of course, you give them the concept of Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Of course, you can imagine some executive going, "Get the hell out of my office."
Exactly. I'm not even sure how they got MGM to distribute it, but, you know, whatever. They said, look, we've already made the movie. It's schlock. And that's the word that I would use to describe it. It's pure 80s schlock. And there's nothing wrong with that, because once you recognize that's what they're going for, it makes it a lot more fun. So that really changed my opinion of the movie.
Yeah, I think part of what really, I mean, aside from the therapeutic value that I just espoused earlier, I think the other part of that is just how genuine, you know? It's like this is a movie that didn't take itself seriously. It knew exactly what it was going for, didn't try to go beyond that. It was what it said it was. This is just Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Don't expect too much beyond that.
And I didn't. I mean, like I said, I wasn't expecting much in the first place, but I respect what these guys did and what they wanted to do, because I think they achieved it. In that manner, this film is a huge success because they made a movie they wanted to make. They made the movie they wanted to make, and a lot of people don't get that opportunity.
And I think that's why movies like this that don't do well at the box office, but do great in after sales. Apparently, the DVD sales and the action figures and the other memorabilia and T-shirts and everything. This is where the movie really made the money. And again, because it was real, it didn't have any pretenses. It exactly, like I said, it was a work of passion. It was a love project, and I think that's why people stick to it.
It's definitely got a cult following.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, you go to sci-fi conventions every now and again, you'll see memorabilia, which is something I want to come back to later. But before I get too far beyond it and everything, the one thing I was going to say, when you said it harkened back to movies of the 50s, and it's funny you mentioned The Blob, because on this viewing, and I'm looking for other little talking points to put into this podcast, and I said, yeah, this movie is a lot like The Blob. There's a lot of parallels, because it starts out with the young kids at makeout point or whatever it is, and they see the celestial arrival.
Top of the world!
Yeah, top of the world in this one. I forget what it was called in The Blob, but then they see the thing arriving, and they're like, oh, what was that? Oh, it just landed not too far from here. Let's go check it out. And before they arrive, some old geezer is the first on scene.
Old man Smithers!
He ends up being the first victim.
That poor dude. I felt for him. I did. Just gonna say.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that whole thing about where's my dog, I'm gonna tear this place, that was actually kind of sad. I was like, that was probably a little bit more emotion than what they intended. But, and then, of course, you had the tropes of the inept cops who just simply refuse to believe that something strange is going on.
Again, the inept cop, singular, because there were only 2 cops in this entire movie until the very end.
Yeah, well, like I said, the 2, plural, the 2 cops, they didn't want to believe it, and it took the younger one to actually find some evidence to finally, when he came around.
Right, but the old cop was the old, grizzled, I hate my life because there's these stupid young kids in this stupid college town that all they ever do is make fun of me and I never got to go to college, or whatever his lifelong suck motivation is from the stereotypical old man cop trope. But the younger cop, Debbie's ex-boyfriend, as we find out later, he's skeptical. He's like, okay, they say something happened, somebody died, I have to go investigate. So he's at least open to the possibility that something happened.
Yes, but then, it's like they take him to the spot and everything, and he's like, oh, what, where this big hole was? It's like, okay, you live here too. Do you remember seeing this big hole? What do you think you think we dug this pit just to fool you?
And that was a great big gigantic hole. I mean, if you look at, it was a matte painting or whatever they used. You could tell, again, $2 million budget. But the hole was like 80 feet wide and 40 feet deep or something like that. You couldn't really tell, but
more.
I mean, it was huge. Like, dude, yeah, I'm with you. You don't remember there being a hole here? I mean, we've lived here our entire lives.
And then, of course, there's okay, I don't believe you, and therefore I'm going to arrest you.
And push you down this stupid hole.
I'm thinking, it's like, on what grounds? What do it's like causing mayhem or something. What do you say? It's like, you guys are just got nothing else better to do than cause me trouble or something like that. And that's an arrestable offense?
Filing a false police report.
Yeah. Okay.
That was just my take on it. I mean, it was the classic trope of you dirty kids. And again, when you find out that they're competitors for Debbie's affections.
Yeah. Then, thinking about that, then it's like, yeah, the guy's just being a douche now because he's a competitor.
But he opens up later when he's like, oh, crap.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. It didn't take much. All he found was some of that stuff that looked like cotton candy. And he said, okay, maybe there's something to your story.
And some guy's glasses.
Yeah, so it was hey, okay, maybe there's something to your story, all right? I'm going to uncuff you. Let's talk about this, and let's go find out what's going on here.
Yeah, because this is a long way to go for a practical joke.
Correct. And of course, here's the funny thing I did on researching this. I had no idea that Christopher Titus was in this movie. It was his character, his glasses.
Oh, okay. I looked at the IMDb cast list, and I'll be honest, I didn't recognize the name. I must have glossed over it.
Yeah. Comedian. He was pretty funny. I liked some of his stand-up and everything, but to find out that he's
he's a comedian. He was funny. Like, isn't that the point?
He made me laugh.
Okay, fair enough.
But if you look at the pictures of him today versus his character, like I said, he was the kid in the beginning who had the 2 grocery bags full of beer and the glasses, and then, of course, later on he is consumed by the killer clowns, supposedly. Yeah, that was like, wow, okay, go figure. So it's the start of a career right there.
So you got to start somewhere because there's no one else in this movie that went anywhere except for John Vernon.
Yeah, well, he was apparently, he was already on his way. I mean, looking him up, and it's like, yeah, he's like the only familiar face in this, and IMDb has him with 204 credits.
But a lot of them are character parts. He's never really been the guy that carried a movie by himself or anything like that.
No, he's again, that characterization of that guy in that film.
Yeah, and I think he's a good example of it. I don't think he's the best. I still recognized him.
Well, the only 2 real prominent movies that I found that he was in that people might go, oh, okay, I think I know who you're talking about, was Animal House. He was the dean.
Yeah, he was Dean Werner.
And Airplane 2. He was the psychiatrist who testified on Ted Stryker's behalf.
And that, folks, is freaking. But oh, sorry, wrong part.
Wrong one.
There were actually a couple of other movies that I recognized him from.
Well, yeah, but like I said, it's like a lot, like you described, a lot of them were small bit parts, nothing prominent, which is fine. I mean, 204 credits. I mean, that's still a pretty successful career. He's obviously been in demand for a long time.
He's been around the world, as it were. Oh, the funny thing that I did catch when I was looking through IMDb was he played Thunderbolt Ross in the Incredible Hulk television series.
Oh, really? Okay. Little Marvel connection there.
He was the voice of. Everybody's connected to Marvel at some point.
It's the new 6 Degrees of Separation game, but Kevin Bacon's out, and Marvel's
right in. He's definitely one of those guys you're like, yeah, I've seen him before, doing stuff, doing that thing.
Yeah. So kind of jumping back to the original segue again, we were talking about the special effects, and yeah, it's like still using matte painting. It's funny how like some movies we see that and we're like, oh please, that just total fake. It's a matte painting. But I don't know, in this movie, it kind of had a certain charm to it. In fact, if it was too realistic, I'd almost be a little disappointed. I kind of really enjoy it. Like the first scene when the 2 teens explore the spaceship and they open the elevator door and it's this huge like reactor pit or whatever it was, and it's supposedly really deep. And yeah,
yes,
total cartoon matte painting. But again, if it was too realistic, it would have been like, no, I like it like this.
You would have lost the schlock value. That's part of its charm.
Yeah, and of course these clowns, they're so much more technologically advanced than we are because of course they're navigating the stars, but yet they're so cartoonish. So they gotta have that look.
So, applying a serious note to this movie and the concept of what's their motivation, why are they here, how the hell did these clowns figure out space travel? Okay, I get it, aliens can look like whatever they want to, but what was the impetus for cotton candy ray guns and all of the circus-associated stuff? Is that where we got the idea because the killer clowns have visited us before and we tried to make them a happy thing?
I think they tried to explain that in the scene when they were looking for was her Debbie in after she got kidnapped and they're in the spaceship and it's like, why clowns? And it's like, well, don't the stories of the ancient astronauts that said they look like clowns, maybe they just developed and look like clowns. But as far as the technology, the way you were asking, my explanation for why the clown, why the circus persona and everything, because here you have a civilization that evolved looking like clowns, but they used to be serious. And that's how they got the technology, and that's why for some people like us, we started cars, they look kind of plain, but eventually they evolved to say, okay, we have the combustion engine, the cars can go, they do fine. And then somebody comes along and says, oh, you know what though? I'm going to make it look like this, or I'm going to make it look silly or outrageous or whatever. And that's what these particular beings did, is that, okay, we have the technology, because we don't really know if these are indicative of their entire species or their entire civilization. They might even be just a rogue group who just happen to embrace the circus act. But it's just they have the technology and they decided to just run with it with some different aesthetic. So that's why.
Here's my explanation.
Okay.
And I think mine has a little bit more grounded reality.
Oh, is this a competition?
Yes. Isn't life a competition? Whoever dies with the most toys wins. Okay, not really. Anyway.
Yeah, unless you die first and I get your toys, and guess what? Now I have the most toys.
Yay! No, wait, no, I died first. This sucks. I hate this idea. Okay, anyway, the clowns have been watching, and they know in the 80s, Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus was pretty big. Circuses throughout the world were kind of a big deal. So they observed, and they said, what's the most harmless thing that we can turn ourselves into in a way that perhaps the locals will accept us? Because, with the exception of the teenagers that first encounter them, all of the locals who are out very late at night, and we'll come back to that, look at the clowns and go, oh, look, it's a clown, that's funny. And then, like when the clown is making the shadow puppets on the wall and it turns into a dinosaur and eats 8 people in a single gulp or whatever, which was pretty cool, by the way. They're all accepting that these are entertaining. Perhaps a little out of place, but entertaining nonetheless. So I think they turned themselves into a variation on something that they had researched as non-threatening. And their thematic weapons were tied to what they had observed. Clowns making balloon animals. Clowns holding up cotton candy. Clowns holding balloons in the first place. That's my backstory for the clown weaponry, because that makes the most sense to me. But they never explained it, and it made me angry that I had to come up with my own ideas. Although it was kind of fun.
Well, I'm about to say, this is a movie that doesn't spoon-feed you anything, and that's always half the fun in a lot of movies.
This movie doesn't spoon-feed you anything except clowns, killer, space, outer, comma, 16 each.
Nope, if I must rebut, then to just develop on your non-threatening image, again, that could also be a result from natural selection, because aliens that look threatening and they come here, people feel threatened, they fight back, they die. Natural selection. They've been booted out of the evolutionary tree. Whereas the clowns, they come here, they're not threatening, they are allowed to continue to survive because they're non-threatening, they're able to catch their prey because they're easy, and they move on.
So, if these aliens evolved that way, or if my theory is correct, that they chose an unassuming form because of observation, what possible sense does it make to put the weakest point in your entire anatomy right dead center in your face? You pop the nose, the clown explodes.
I don't know, kind of the same reason why we have our reproductive organs right next to our anus, and we only have one heart. We breathe air, which can be that through a port that's right next to where we eat, so we can easily obstruct it with food. Hey, evolution isn't always right.
Our heart is protected by a bony case that's flexible to accommodate the lungs' expansion. So there's that. As far as the eating and airway thing, that they're both required for survival, so maybe that makes sense. I mean, we could have blowholes like dolphins and whales.
Well, I mean, that's about to say, yeah, there's many animals that have a very separated esophagus and windpipe. Does intelligent design like them better, or does sometimes just evolution just isn't perfect?
I think we are the best evolutionary design we could come up with at the time. We embrace or exemplify, that's the word I'm looking for, the best survival characteristics for our species.
I'm glad you put that qualifier for our species, because like I said, there's a lot of species who do certain things a little better than we do.
Sure, but again, we also do things that are counterproductive, but that's different.
My point being, yeah, they're vulnerable on the nose, but again, that's totally plausible in a evolutionary standpoint, especially if they come from an area or an environment that doesn't have a whole lot of natural predators.
Yeah, because no one wants to see the clowns. What do they look like in their natural form, though? If, again, they adopted this form to suit our special research needs.
That's a good question. Somebody needs to remake this movie just to explore that.
Perhaps they could explore it in the sequel that has been in development hell for 29 years. I'm serious. There's been a sequel in development hell for 29 years.
Yeah, I believe it. But, that was one of the things I wondered. It's just like, what would this movie be like if it had a larger budget and somebody with a little bit more of a sci-fi / horror-minded viewpoint?
Again, it wouldn't be the same movie because one of the things that I really appreciated about this was what I'd mentioned earlier. It's schlock value. It's just a labor of love by the guys that made it, and it's not meant to be the thing that we just turned it into where we're trying to analyze, why did they do this? Why did they do that? I'm just doing it for entertainment value because it was one of those things like, why clowns? Why are they here?
Well, I was going to say, it's what we do, It's just like, that's why we have a Facebook page called Uber Nerds, because we take things and we don't just take them at face value. We want to psychoanalyze. We want to dissect everything, Because it's fun. Ultimately, as long as we appreciate, like you said, that this is pure schlock, it's just for entertainment, we can enjoy it. We can enjoy it on both levels. We can enjoy it on all levels.
Whatever level you want. 8th floor, women's lingerie. So, just put a pin in that, as it were, and I hate that phrase, so let's move on. I've got one other kind of bone to pick with this movie in a this doesn't make sense kind of way. What time of year was this movie set? Summertime? Fall time? I'm guessing not winter because no one really seemed cold, but it could be Southern California. Even at night it gets a little chilly, so...
I was about to say, people were wearing light sweaters.
So I would lean towards like September, October. They were talking about school, so I would assume school's in session, so it's not summer. So let me ask you this. What time does it get dark where you are?
About 7 p.m., give or take.
It gets dark, or... Because it's 7:21 right here, and we're at dusk.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, between 7:20 is like when you start to see the sunset and it starts to get a little dark. You start to see shadows.
Okay, so knowing that it gets dark around 7 o'clock-ish, starts to get dark. And as dark as it was when the movie started, and the teenagers or young 20-somethings, college-age students, are up at the top of the world getting their makeout on, one would assume that it's probably about 10 or 11 at night. Is that reasonable?
I would not dispute that.
Okay. So 10 or 11 at night, a flying object goes overhead and lands. Let's just say, conservatively, it takes a half an hour to get there and find the thing. Is that reasonable?
I would say between 10 to 30 minutes, depending, because she described it as it landed right there.
But again, from where they were and the elevation... Okay, 10 to 30 minutes. All right. Then we get to the alien craft, and there's probably, we'll call that real time for what they were doing, and let's say they spend 5 to 10 minutes inside the craft. I'm sure it actually took longer than that because they had to walk up to it, they had to get inside. So we'll cut for time and just say it was about 20 minutes. Is that reasonable?
Okay, go on.
So we're at about an hour, right? Is that fair-ish?
Mm-hmm.
So it's now somewhere between 11 o'clock and midnight, right? Okay. Then, once they leave the clown spaceship, then they head back to town. Based on the evidence presented by the cop when they stopped and looked at all the other kids on Makeout Point that had been shot with the cotton candy guns. Yep. And the sign that said town is 5 miles away. It's 5 miles to town, which on a mountain road, you figure what, speed limit's probably about 45. So you're taking another 10 minutes or so. So it's 11:10, midnight, quarter after 11, quarter after midnight, something like that. Why were all those people out trying to catch a bus at midnight? And actually, not even that, because there was already back and forth and back and forth. There's already stuff going on. What were these people doing out at 1 in the morning trying to catch a bus? What were these kids doing out at the local burger shop, conveniently named Big Top Burger, as a tip of the hat to the clown theme. Why were they out at midnight? Who takes their kids out at midnight for a nice burger and says, "Hey, look, there's a clown out there," and doesn't think, "Oh God, we got to get home soon. This is crazy." No one seemed to have any concept of what time it was. Maybe the drugstore was open 24 hours. I can buy that. I don't think they ever actually said. But there was an awful lot of time that went by. And it all happened in one night, because by the time they get to the pier or the amusement park where the clowns had finally set back down, it's dawn. The sun is coming up. So why are these people out at 2:33 in the morning? Who gets a pizza delivered at 1 o'clock in the morning? Find me a pizza joint that'll deliver a pizza at 1 in the morning. Find me a person that thinks it's reasonable to answer the door at 12:30 in the morning to see who it is and notice that someone's handing them a box of chocolates dressed like a clown. No one in this town is sane.
I got nothing to say to that, because you're absolutely correct. I mean, the candy grab, even in the middle of the day, I wouldn't be accepting that.
It wasn't even Mongo with a candygram. Or a candygram for Mongo, rather. It was one of those things where, like, okay, again, you put the Schlock movie on and go, okay, this is just good fun, and roll with it. But it's one of those things where, like, that doesn't make any sense, and maybe it's not supposed to.
No, I honestly don't think it's supposed to, because, I never once thought any of that. It was just, clowns need victims, It's like, so.
What were they doing with their victims? What was the point of the cotton candy pods, aside from, again, tip of the hat to Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Well, that one, I thought of that, actually.
Okay, hit me.
Okay. One, I'm thinking that considering what it did, I mean, you saw the pods. They're considerably smaller than the human form, let's say, because people would be standing up, and when the pod came to rest, it was at least half the height and smaller. So you gotta think that thing, probably those strands really compress the human body. So a very painful process. You gotta think. They get hit with that ray and you're getting squished into that thing. And I'm thinking, what it's for? Hey man, maybe these aliens need high sugar content in their diet. So compress the human body, dissolve a little bit of that flesh and blood and everything, make a very sweet juice, so to say. Because when you saw that scene where he comes in with the crazy straw and he's, sniffing it and everything, it's like, yeah, maybe the mixture of human flesh and blood mixed with the cotton candy, makes that certain smell that's what he's looking for. And when he found the right one, stuck a straw in it, took a nice big swig.
Okay, fair enough. That actually makes sense when you add that straw component in there. One of the other things about this movie that goes back to that whole time thing is there's the classic movie trope of the young pretty girl in the shower, if you recall that scene.
Oh, yeah.
That is the classic schlock horror movie. Maybe we'll see some boobs. And it never went anywhere. Not that I was expecting to see boobs. I mean, the movie was PG, and I didn't really care if I did or didn't. But it was, there's something in the hamper, and then nothing ever happened. And I say that in the sense of we never saw her die. It was just suddenly Debbie comes home, and her roommate's not in the shower. The shower's off, so it's not like you would notice something amiss. It's just, there was something in the hamper, and now her roommate's not there. I guess she got eaten? I don't know. It just seemed weird. That was actually the only piece that I really had a genuine complaint with was, well, what happened to her? Did she die? Because everyone else got zapped or eaten by shadow puppets or trapped in a balloon or something. She was the only one that nothing happened to, or nothing that you saw anyway.
Wait, who are you talking about?
The lady that was in the shower.
That was Debbie.
Was that? No, I thought that was before Debbie got home.
No, that's after they dropped Debbie off. She had that whole shower scene.
I just swore up and down that was Debbie's roommate.
No, that was Debbie.
Now I'm mad. Listeners, go watch this movie. Tell me if I'm wrong or right.
Yeah, because then she gets out of the shower, she's drying off, and then she's wondering what the noise is, and she finds there's little clown puppet things in the hamper. There's one coming out of the toilet. There's one in the medicine two in the medicine cabinet, I should say.
See, now that doesn't wash with the way I remember it, and now I guess it makes sense. I mean, I thought Debbie was missing for the entire second act. Like, we just dropped Debbie off at her house, and nothing else matters.
Yeah, well, so the thing is, what it is like you see the scene where she gets in the shower, and then they cut off to a bunch of other stuff that happens with other characters, and then eventually she does come out of the shower, and it's like, man, how long was she in that shower? Apparently she was in it for quite a long time.
She's out of hot water, and it's now 3 a.m, and there's still people waiting for the damned bus.
Basically. Here's the thing, though. When I talk about the little clown puppets that came out, it makes me wonder. It's like, is the popcorn the way they reproduce?
Which made me curious because the popcorn, when they first went into the spaceship, was pretty evenly dispersed. I was actually expecting something to come out of it, so it makes sense.
He was very tentative about it and everything, and maybe that's why they had the popcorn gun. You shoot it on a victim, and when they finally hatch, they, like a lot of insects, they lay the egg on a hapless victim, so when the egg hatches, the young larvae has something to feast on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm tracking.
Yeah. That works out. But I think it's a good segue into the other thing I want to talk about, though, is that you had the popcorn gun, you had the cotton candy guns, and all these cotton candy bulbs that they hung. Everything. I mean, I'm thinking it's like, wow, these are some pretty interesting props. I kind of wonder where they are today. I mean, were they all destroyed and they said just threw them away once the movie was done, or are they in somebody's collection today? I'm really interested.
That is a good question. I am curious what these guys did with this stuff.
Because I know in a lot of conventions, I don't see anybody saying that this is a genuine prop from Killer Klowns from Outer Space. And, casual search, I suppose if I do a more detailed search, I could probably find some, but casual search on Google didn't really come up with anything.
Sometimes I don't want to go too far into it. I mean, that's a good question, but there's sometimes when I'm doing research, I'm like, I don't want to know too much about this. I mean, there's parts of it I kind of want to, leave the mystery.
I think, though, the cotton candy gun would be an interesting add-on to this idea I have for a collection, and the wife said no.
I heard that.
Yeah. Anyways, I had this idea for a collection of villains' weapons.
Nice.
And this is the hard part, because I want Darth Vader's lightsaber to be like the centerpiece, but I can't find a replica of just the handle. They all come with that light bar. I just want the handle.
Just cut off the light bar. It'll be fine.
Yeah, well. But Darth Vader's lightsaber, Voldemort's wand, the One Ring, of course the Infinity Gauntlet, and hey, I think, a Killer Clown cotton candy gun would be an interesting addition to that.
That would be I know what all of these are. What the hell is that?
That's what would draw the eye.
So while we were talking, I did do some research on the internet, which goes to support my statement earlier about why I sometimes don't want to go too far into the research, because I just did a quick search for the shower scene, and it turns out I was wrong, you were right. Listeners, still send us email and still let us know things, but in the midst of recording the episode, I did some Googly search and found out I was wrong. I apologize.
Okay.
But there is a website that is a wiki, and people have already hypothesized that the popcorn was the larva, as you had just discussed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think, again, going back to why I don't want to do the research beforehand, is now we've come up with this independently. So we're corroborating our theory with something that other people have thought. Said, oh, okay, well then it does make sense to other people as well. We're not the only ones.
Wow, I feel good about that.
See, there you go.
We're not alone.
There's an entire wiki dedicated to this. So, again, this is a very cultish movie in the sense that it's got a strong following. It's just not one of the top movies ever.
Star Trek, this is not.
No.
You are not going to see an entire convention dedicated to Killer Klowns. If anything, these are the guys that sneak into the Star Trek convention and hide in the corner.
But you can see these people at some of the other fandom conventions doing Killer Clown costumes and stuff like that. And most of the people that go to these things will go, oh, that's from Killer Klowns. I know that. So, again, it's just like anything. People have their fandom, and I would never take that away from them because that's what gives them pleasure. And if they could make balloon animal dogs like the Clowns did that actually track people down, that'd be super awesome.
That was pretty cool. When I first saw that, I just couldn't stop laughing at that.
The interesting thing about that, again, this was some research that I did find, was they kept popping the balloons when they made the dog because it would run across the ground and pop like you'd expect a balloon to do. Mm-hmm. So they made one and then they coated it in latex, in like a thicker coating of latex, and worked like a champ. They're like, yeah, it might actually still exist somewhere there.
Never know.
But one of the other things that John Vernon did that I found interesting was the name drop about 23 minutes in. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm sure it's Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Yes, it is. And they did an excellent job of foreshadowing his death.
Not gonna make a puppet out of me.
You're not going to make a dummy out of me, exactly.
A dummy. I'm sorry. Okay, stand corrected. A dummy out of me. Yes.
Yep. Legit foreshadowing. A movie masterpiece. The other question that I had was, what was up with the girl clowns?
You had to have them.
As soon as the fellas fell into the ball pit, the girl clowns turned around and one of the girls' balloons inflated. And I laughed because I think that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think that was the only reason for their being included in this movie, was just that titillating laugh and a bunch of sick, demented people looking at that going, would you?
Oh, no. But you have to wonder, though, the whole scene with the girl clowns, and then when we see the fellows later, they've got lipstick all over them, and their clothes are a bit torn and that sort of thing. I was actually wondering if it had been inspired by the girl gremlin in Gremlins 2. And Gremlins 2 came out in 1990, so I wonder if there was a certain degree of inspiration from Killer Klowns to do that Gremlins 2 piece. Because they had a very similar scene in that movie.
Yeah, with Richard Picardo, too. That was funny, because he's of Star Trek fame.
You mean Robert Picardo?
What would I say?
Richard.
Is it Robert?
It's Robert.
I stand correct.
You sit corrected.
Mr. Picardo.
We should call him Steve.
I was going to say, though, yeah, you saw the two ice cream guys after the scene, their encounter with the female clowns. They've been kissed all over. Their clothes are a little tattered, which means things probably got a little rough, which makes me wonder.
Guess.
How would Klingons deal with that?
Okay, that's a little weird. Do Klingons even like clowns?
I don't know.
I don't recall in any Star Trek episode ever seeing a Klingon interact with a clown. And this is a really weird rabbit hole, and I don't know how far we're going to go down it, but...
But that's the thing. We don't have any mile markers or anything to tell us where to go. We're all on our own, man. We're off the reservation.
I think that the Klingons would be amenable to the whole interaction because they have a violent streak. We've seen what passes for Klingon foreplay in Star Trek episodes, so I reckon they'd be okay with it.
I think so. I think this would be categorized as a Klingon kink.
Probably.
They probably would look at it and says, you know what? I'm going to ride this train, but I'm not going to tell anybody else about it. And this is when Klingons were introduced to shame.
You have shamed us.
For me, I'm thinking that they would be okay with it because of one event that happened many years ago when we went to see a Star Trek movie in a town where people dressed up. When cosplay was cosplay before people knew it as cosplay. People dressed up to stand in line to see this Star Trek movie. And of course, people came dressed up as Starfleet, Klingons, what have you. Well, there was this group of people who were all together. They were all dressed like Klingons, and when they all got in the theater, they all sat together, so it was a grouping of Klingons. And the first trailer before the movie started was for Beavis and Butthead Do America. And the way those people laughed hysterically, you almost kind of looked at it and says, you know what? That looks like a movie that Klingons would probably really enjoy. Just that lowbrow humor that they would just really get into, you know? So Klingons being okay with clowns, I think based on that, I think they would.
Fair enough. Listeners, what do you think? Klingons and clowns. Well, they have it's an alliteration at its finest. Klingon clowns, killer Klingon clowns from Kling. That is the name of the Klingon homeworld. So
I've heard Kling, I've heard Kronos. I'm never really sure which one.
Oh, there you go. Killer Klingon crown. I can't even say it. Killer Klingon clowns from Kronos. See, it's a tongue twister. We had another couple of K's and we're good.
I can imagine the Klingon trying to say that and just getting frustrated and backhanding somebody.
And that's how the botlef was invented. Okay.
Yeah. Really fell down that rabbit hole. Wow.
Yeah. I think they would have appreciated this film, though, because there is at least one good fight scene, and that was when the little clown rides up on the bike to the biker bar, and the guy says, oh, what are you going to do, knock my block off? And he does. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of good plays on words.
That One is my favorite scene. I love that scene, that whole, put up your dukes, I was like, what are you gonna do, knock my block off? And he knocks his head clean off. Love that scene. But it's good that you mentioned that, because that's something I kind of jotted down. I said, if we talk about it, we'll talk about it. And okay, I guess we're gonna talk about it.
Yes.
You remember, and I mentioned this in Howard the Duck, and I think I mentioned this in a couple other podcasts, the 80s trope of the over-the-top bully.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like, here we are again. I mean, bullies, yeah, they do some horrible things to people, but I mean, he just walked up and it's like, hey man, can I see your bike? And then he just proceeds to demolish it. And wow, that's just over the top. It is, I mean, like I said, bullies, they focus in on something and they really like chickens finding a blood spot and they just peck the hell out of it, but this one is just, so random, and it's just like, hey man, let me look at your bike, smash, and it's like, oh, you're gonna cry,
and then he's got all of his boys behind him egging him on, going, yeah,
hey, should have let him ring his bell, or should have let him ride his bike, which, by the way, was that the only black person in this entire film?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing, but anyways, over the top bully, again, typical 80s trope and everything. It's just really glad he got his comeuppance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I thought that scene felt a little out of place, especially given that all of the other clowns were capturing the people instead of just outright killing them.
Well, there was the one that ran the car off the road. He just killed him.
And that part kind of, I don't want to say made sense. It was more of a, hey, we need to get to where the bulk of the people are.
So I'm just going to kill this guy while I'm on the way? Sure,
why not?
Okay.
But it's killer clowns. Killer Klingon clowns from Kronos.
And, the clown that killed the police officer, using him as a ventriloquist dummy, didn't exactly save him for anything. He just, when he was done with him, he just threw him away.
But, again, they may have come back and cleaned up.
Maybe. By the way, that was actually the creepiest scene.
When they were scooping people up with the
No. When he was the ventriloquist and he had the little...
Oh, okay.
They were using, dripping blood to make it look like a...
That was pretty creepy. Yeah. I'm with you.
It's like, and the just that, whatever it is, that enhancement they did to his voice, and just saying, we just want to kill you, That was probably the creepiest scene.
I think those were the only real lines of dialogue that any of the clowns had. Aside from the, puppy dukes, which was real high-pitched, real squeaky. It was. It could have just been the noises that they were making. But what I was thinking was, going back to the cleanup thing, was they had killed a whole bunch of people through various means, and you didn't really see what they were doing until later they came back and were scooping them all up. Because I was wondering, like, why are they just leaving them there? What the hell's the point of this killer clown invasion? And then they started cleaning them up to do whatever it was they were going to do with them, drink them with straws.
Yeah, and I like that in the beginning when the two main characters explore the ship and they see the storage facility and they only see like a handful of cotton candy things hanging.
And then there's more as the movie goes along.
And then when they go back and they say, this is the room we were in earlier, except now it's full.
And Joe Lombardo is still in there.
Yeah.
They said his name like 3 times, and he never showed up in the movie ever as a character.
No, it's just to know that he recognized him, and it was important for some reason.
Well, according to, again, the research that I did, there was a scene filmed with Joe Lombardo, and it ended up not making the final cut of the film, so Joe Lombardo was actually supposed to be a person that was in there. So I went looking through the IMDb credits to find out, well, who the hell played Joe Lombardo if this was a thing? And it was some stunt guy that was uncredited. And this guy, the stuntman, has been in 350 movies as a stuntman. So it was just some stunt guy that they pulled in to play Joe Lombardo. It was just one of those things I had to find out who this guy was because, like I said, they named his character or dropped his name 3 or 4 times in the movie. You're like, who is this guy?
So in essence, this movie killed him twice.
Yes.
They cut you good. But, kind of going back to this thing about like when the teens first found the storage room and it already had like a handful of cotton candy things. And right there, just like, again, this particular viewing, in preparation for this, and it's the first thought that came to mind was like, man, these clowns really worked fast. Because all we saw was the first guy who found the circus tent. The first old geezer, the first victim, all we saw was that. But when the teens showed up, man, they already had like close to a dozen cotton candy things.
Yeah, but we don't know where they came from, and we don't know what they had done beforehand and how long these foodstuffs, which they appear to be, last. So that could have been from their last planetary visit.
Oh, very true, very true. Okay. So I was going to say, man, those clowns, man, they're very efficient. They work fast.
They do work fast. I'm surprised none of their other victims figured out how their nose worked. kind of sad.
Hey, you know, how long do you think, if it wasn't for Urso's revenge, how long do you think it would have been before the rebellion found the exhaust port that took down the Death Star, if ever?
They could have used the Force.
I like how your eyes are shifting back. I wish people could see your eyes shifting back and forth.
But the clown nose sets up the big finish with Clownzilla, which is what they actually named the monster at the end of it.
Which really supports my whole thing. It's like, if you ever want to make anything, no matter what, sound cool, just add Zilla at the end.
I think that's kind of like the same thing with politics. If you just add gate to the end of it, it's a political scandal. If you add Zilla to the end of it, it's a monster thing, and it sounds cool.
Yeah, because, I mean, you had Hogzilla, you have Bridezilla.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
You want to make God sound cool, you just call him Godzilla, you know?
Jesus. I have nothing to say to that.
I'm sure somebody will.
Listeners, do you think adding Zilla to God makes him even better? Oh my God. And again, just the whole Clownzilla scene goes to the $2 million budget because it was basically dark space, Clownzilla, and the people. Not a dollar spent on anything in the back except, hey, how do we turn the lights out so no one can see anything back there?
Based on that, on keeping the lights off, this movie probably saved more money than it spent.
But I will say, that is one of the things that does add a certain degree of enjoyment to this movie because, like I said earlier, the minute you find out that this was just a labor of love, a passion project, they did it with minimal funds for a movie of the day, it really gives you an appreciation for what these guys put together. So, my final thoughts, because I don't really have a whole lot left to talk about, this was a fun movie. I didn't expect, when I was going into this, to have as much fun as I did. Was it absurd? Abso-friggin-lutely. Was it extremely low budget? Did I see zippers on costumes at certain points? Yep, sure did. But again, I had fun, and that made it worth watching.
Yeah, very well said. You know, and the funny thing is like, I've read that, yeah, you can see the grip's hands or the puppeteer's hands in certain scenes. You can see the strings somewhere. Or, yeah, you could see zippers. I, personally, even knowing that they're there, I never actually saw them. I haven't done the frame by frame or said, oh, yeah, there it is. I just watched the movie, you know, and it's just like I've never actually noticed it. I know they're there, because everyone talks about it, but I've never actually noticed it, which I guess is testament to just how much fun I have with this movie.
Yeah, it's not the best movie I've ever seen. It's not the best movie on the planet, but it was fun.
Hey, you know, everybody has their movie. You have Howard the Duck, mine is Killer Klowns.
At least my movie has, you know, like a Howard the Duck song at the end. Just saying. There was no Killer Klowns song. They did play Send In the Clowns as a theme to the opening credits, so that was nice.
Yeah.
I was looking for that at some point in the movie. I figured it had to be in there. So, is that your final thoughts? I mean, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, no, I don't have any other thoughts other than just, you know, the realization that this movie's 30 years old, and just to look back and that little girl in the scene of the burger joint, Big Top Burger, you know,
at freaking midnight.
At midnight.
Sorry.
But yeah, she's probably about, you know, 10-ish, give or take, and everything, you know, so she's probably in her 40s right now, you know? It's like, yeah, that's kind of weird to think that, wow, so much time has gone by and it doesn't feel like it.
I have to agree with you. I'm suddenly finding myself closer to 48 and thinking, what, I don't, okay, what happened all the time? But it's okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just, like I said, it's just like certain movies you look back and it's like, really, this movie's this old?
Yes.
It doesn't feel like it. You wonder where the time went.
Yeah, I have found myself doing that to a lot of movies that came out when we were younger, like especially some of the 90s movies we've talked about. Like, oh my God, that was in the 90s? I so thought that was later. Okay, so where would you put this on your shelf?
Well, it is general population. I mean, I can't put everything in a special place. And, you know, it's like this movie is special, but not like, you know, uber special. It's among an exalted population, but among the population nonetheless.
Okay. I gotta say, again, I'm not gonna go out and buy this movie. I was glad it was available on Hulu so that I could, you know, give it a watch. But if I did own it and I were to throw it in there, there's a part of me that wants to put it on the second shelf just because I respect what they were doing and that they knew that they were making we'll call it a horrible movie, but it was a fun horrible movie. So that gives it some props. But I'm going to overall put it in general population, in maybe the leading edge of the third shelf, if you will. It gives itself its own credit for recognizing what it is. And to me, that puts it a little higher up there. Now, in the real, like in the annals of filmmaking, I'll be honest, I should probably put it, like on the fifth shelf and kind of leave it there. Like, yeah, maybe one day watch it, maybe one day don't. But I found myself having fun with it, and I was not expecting that.
That's good. I'm glad.
All right. So thanks for picking it. I actually appreciate that.
No problem.
Okay. And let us now select our next movie, because this one's going to be random.
Okay, well, before you do that, I've got to say that, one thing that you are definitely a lot more accepting of schlocky movies than I can be. Because, like I said, it's like, between the two of the worst movies we reviewed, it was like Dragon Emperor and Howard the Duck, I was just like, oh, but you are definitely a lot more.
Schlock is fun.
It is, and believe me, it is. I have Schlock. I have this movie. I have Shock Treatment. I have
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Actually, I don't have a copy of that.
See, that's straight schlock, and it's a lot of fun.
But I have Doom Generation. I have... See, that one you might not be so forgiving of. I have Bubba Hotep.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, I mean, I have schlocky movies.
I think you have to be in the appreciative mood for that type of schlock, and it has to be in your wheelhouse. I don't like all the schlocky movies. I like some, and this one, because I recognized that that's what they were going for, then I appreciated it more. If I'd have thought they were trying to make a serious movie, I'd be like, no, this is hot garbage. Don't ever watch this. Ever, ever, ever. But they were having fun with it, and they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and I'm also 5 titles away of having a complete collection of Godzilla titles.
Awesome. Send us a list of which ones you're missing, and we'll talk to our listeners and see if they can't point you in the right direction.
Oh, that's not a matter of when to get them. It's just, budget.
Well, there's that. Okay. So let's hit the random magic movie generator button, shall we?
Go for it.
Okay, and pushing the random magic movie button for our next film.
Hugo.
All right. Hugo
All right,
it is.
Hugo. Yeah, all right, that's good.
That'll be fun.
Very, very appropriate, because it's kind of talks about the birth of film, or at least the
And we're getting out
Genesis
of the 80s.
days. Yeah, let's get out of the 80s, and let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to some real history on filmmaking there. That's a good
That'll
movie.
be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So with that, listeners, send us your feedback and comments at wrios2016mr@gmail.com, or drop us a line on our Facebook page, reach out to us on the Twitters. You can also actually send direct messages on Facebook, so if you use the messengery thing from our Facebook page, we can respond sort of in real time, which I actually did with another listener, and I forgot to mention it during our listener feedback section. So listener Eva Alvarado, who listened to her first episode, it was the Shrek 2 episode, said she had a really good time and wanted to let us know that she enjoyed it.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
She did have some comments on our voices, in that they blend well together, that I'm a little more bass. I'm a little lower, you're a little higher. It works out well because it's a good partnership, and she liked the banter back and forth.
Well, I'm glad she liked it. And so, we shall go to war.
She wasn't as big a fan of the rabbit holes that we go down as Jeff is.
Really?
But we certainly appreciate the feedback. So... And I'm sure she listened to this like, oh, they went down a rabbit hole for a little while. Like, it happens. It's kind of part of our... It's part of our charm. But anyway, with that, thank you, listeners, for your feedback. And as always, reach out at the points of contact. And we are still looking for suggestions for 5-0 listener-selected films. So... send us your suggestions as well. And Dan, your movie-themed out is...
What are you going to do, knock my block off?
Yes, I am. All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks with Hugo.